welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Turn the Page podcast. My name is Jessica. I'm going to be your host for this episode. And I am excited on this lovely spring day to introduce the author of the book Seasonal Fears, or actually I'm going to let her introduce herself.
I'm Seanan Mcguire. I wrote Seasonal Fears, which is the second book in the Alchemical Journeys series. I've written quite a few other things as well. It is actively difficult to make me stop writing things. So,
yeah, for sure. You've written under other names as well.
Yes, I am also Mira Grant and Asphodel Deborah Baker.
That is extremely cool, and I'm going to get to that. So really quickly, so I wanted to read Middle Game when it came out, and it was one of those things that I was like, I'm going to read this, and then Seasonal Fears came out. And I was like, okay, now it's time to read Middle Game and Seasonal Fears back to back, which was extremely cool. So they're set in the same world. However, characters from Middle Game are not the main characters in Seasonal Fears. So do you want to just talk a little bit about like a starting point, like when you finished Middle Game, where you knew that the books were going?
I mean, I've been trying to tell people that Middle Game is a sidequel. It's not a true sequel. It happens chronologically after Middle Game.
Yes.
We're mostly not going to be spending time with those people.
Yes.
I've known the basic shape of all 5 books that I hope to write since finishing Middle Game. We only have the first 2 right now. I am asking people to please buy Seasonal Fears so they'll let me write Title Creatures, which is basically my my rallying cry is like, can you buy the book so I can write the next book, please? I enjoy writing books, but I do have to eat. So I know the full shape of things, and because they are not being written in a true sequels fashion, it's less I am building each room in a dungeon one by one, and more I am writing interlinked adventures in the same D&D setting. I can always make sure that they end at a satisfying place. If I have to stop here, it will suck for me because there will be story yet untold, but for readers, they will have full story.
I really like how you described it as a D&D dungeon. And I like the term sidequel. When I first looked at the cover of Seasonal Fears, it said a companion to Middle Game. But I really think sidequel is like, that should be an official word for things, because I think that fits it a lot better than a companion. In the sense that, so the characters, we can start off with the characters. This is whilst Middle Game was a lot of a familial story between twins, Roger and Dodger. This is almost like a childhood love story and a bit of a fairy tale in that sense. And it was very unique from Middle Game. However, as I'm reading it, I think even though it can probably be picked up on its own, it should lead people back to Middle Game because the world is just so rich and you're going to want to know where it all comes together. So we have Harry and Melanie, who are our playground sweethearts of type. And Melanie fits into the world in the same sense that she's not entirely human or necessarily human. And Harry is a completely different story altogether. I don't want to get there immediately, but it was quite a journey to take with the 2 of them. And I just loved reading more about the world and about like the seasons personified and how it all worked.
I do recommend reading Middle Game first, if only because there are points of crossover between the 2. And if you hit those crossover points in Seasonal Fears before you've read Middle Game, it will spoil a lot of the ending of Middle Game for you. But you're right in that they are very different. They are in the way both love stories. Roger and Dodger, that is absolutely a familial love story.
Yeah.
They are learning how to love each other and how to love themselves and how to be who they are together. But there is nothing romantic about it. And my brother, who I wrote this book in part for, and Middle Game is actually dedicated to him. He and I spent a lot of time stressed out before the book came out, just being like, oh God, are people going to ship Roger and Dodger? Ew.
Listen, shippers are gonna ship. One can't.
Shippers are going to ship.
Shippers are gonna ship.
But it was still just like, this is my love letter in a non-sexual sense to my brother. I don't like that thought.
Fair enough. As somebody who is close with my own brother, who's actually 10 years younger than me, and I'm a mom of twins, by the way, too. So I found the whole relationship interesting because it is a very close relationship. So but I read it exactly as you were saying.
Yeah, so I tell people that Seasonal Fears is kind of John Hughes meets Game of Thrones. Because it is that sort of Americana, your truest love is the girl who lived next door when you were 7 story. And that is another entire setup of cliches and tropes that I just wanted the chance to play with for once. If I'm able to continue, there will be a different form of love story in each of the books. Because there are all the different modes of love that the Greeks gave us, and we mostly only play with romantic and occasionally familial.
There were a lot of interesting characters aside. So, you have you have a book within a book, which you actually wrote, which I find extremely cool also. So it's like, oh, you have all your bases covered. I'm certainly hoping that this story continues because, again, like I said, the world is extremely cool. But then you have Asphodel's stories, which are like, it's a book within a book. It's just cool because it's peppered within all of the stories.
So when I first wrote Middle Game, the absolute first time, here is a fun piece of trivia. The very first time I did Middle Game, it was not centered around Asphodel Baker's books. I actually used The Wizard of Oz, the first one. And when we went out on submission, I got told, well, The Wizard of Oz is a little played out right now. People aren't super interested. Can you replace that? So I wrote in the Up and Under books. And that mostly, I think, only shows through in the ending of Middle Game. There is a sequence where you can kind of see the cut and replace. But having written the chunks of Over the Woodward Wall, which is the first of the 4 Up and Under books, to go into Middle Game, I then sat down and wrote the rest of the book so that I would understand how they fit together. And when my editor asked if I had ever considered writing it, I was able to have a draft on his desk next day. And I am very fortunate in that with the Up and Under books, because they are less of a publishing commitment because they're so small, we have already verified that all 4 of those will be coming out. The next one is next year, and I would like to verify the title, but my arms are full of cat. Hello. Yes.
I'm jealous.
So I have 4 cats, and the second largest of them is currently stepping onto my computer keyboard. So that's not going to mess with anything at all.
No, it's totally fine. We love cats on computer boards.
I was more concerned that she was going to disconnect something.
Oh, that's what editing's for. We're all good. And
that's fair. So
yeah, I was going to say, and for our listeners, because this is only audio, the cat was extremely fluffy and adorable. So
yes, she is. She's a good girl. You can see lots of pictures of her if you go to my Twitter. Her name is Elsie. She is a tortoiseshell Maine Coon.
Awesome.
So Into the Wind-Wracked Wilds will be out next year, and that's the 3rd of the Up and Under books. And then there'll be one more after that, which we're still kind of arguing about the title for. And the challenge of those, like the really big challenge I set for myself is that in universe, they came out in like the 1890s. They are very much turn of the 19th century books, same as the original set of Oz books. And in that world, they are childhood classics. Do you know what a ridiculous challenge it is to set for yourself to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to write some childhood classics now. Like you feel arrogant the entire time you're doing it. Every sentence feels terrible. Plus, I have to write in both a semi-archaic style and not move into references that Asphodel wouldn't have had. Now, thankfully, she is an alchemist. She does have access to certain powers and bits of information that Baum wouldn't have had. So if things occasionally slide just a little too modern, it's okay. I can justify that as Asphodel Baker was the greatest alchemist of her day.
So other things within Seasonal Fears, you have like a really good picture of the corn jennies and the jacks. So there's the seasons personified, and in order for somebody new to step up and take their place, the former ones have to die, which it's no spoiler that it doesn't turn out well for the ones who had it before, because this is very much the story of Melanie and Harry. But the corn jennies and the jacks, there's Jack Frost, there's Jack in the Green.
Jack in the Green and Stingy Jack.
Stingy Jack, right, are supposed to be like companions to sort of coach the people who are ascending to the seasons to their role. I loved Melanie's Jack because Melanie is hopeful to be winter personified, a winter ascendant, and Melanie's Jack was great. I love that gender and who's a Jack and who's a Jenny does not have anything to do with being a Jack or a Jenny, but man, did I love Melanie's Jack.
Oh, Melanie's Jack is fantastic. I adore her. And all of the Jacks and Jennies, there are 3 Jacks and 1 Jenny because I couldn't find a summer Jack. But all of the Jacks and Jennies are drawn from folklore. And the idea is that the Jack Frosts and the Corn Jennies shepherd winter and summer, who are the actual incarnate seasons. And then the Jack in the Green and Stingy Jack, which is spring and fall respectively, they kind of stand alone because they are liminal seasons. They're the transitions. So they don't have an actual manifest season to take care of. They set up the labyrinth that will test the next set of seasons when they come along.
And I loved that again. And I loved just that whole folklore about, winter and summer being like almost like fixed seasons, but spring and fall are like the seasons, like you can physically see the change within them. So what types of folklore, like if people want to read more about that folklore, should they read?
Well, so I went to the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, for a degree in folklore and mythology. That means there's a lot. I highly recommend classic English folk tales. If you want to look up Catherine Briggs' Folklore of the British Isles, that's a good one. Also, the very classic, go for the Golden Bough. I mean, Fraser is a little overplayed, but he did so much work on seasonal monarchs and temporary kings, and that is an excellent place to start. The book itself actually takes its title from a phrase from a Tallis Kimberly song. She's a British folk singer. And if you listen to her music, she touches on a lot of the same folklore that I'm playing with.
Another thing that I just loved about this book again is it was just like, it also was very funny. And like it had like a road trip aspect to it, which was also very cool. I guess that could be part of the John Hughes part of it as well. Like you have your teenagers on a road trip and learning about themselves. But I like when people are talking about the different kind of alchemists. And somebody mentions like the hot topic alchemist.
I spend a lot of time in odd, nerdy subcultures. I'm a comic book fan. I'm a Magic the Gathering player. I'm a Dungeons and Dragons player. I'm in all of these subcultures, and you see the way that even when we are united by a common interest, we striate ourselves. We say we don't, and maybe we don't because we never ever feel like we're actually the ones sitting at the cool kids table, because there's always one kid cooler than us. But we love a lunchroom where you can point to the tables and go, that's the stoners, that's the plastics, that's the band geeks. That is just how people work. We like to organize things. And so anytime I am setting up a new group of people who don't actually exist, like my alchemists, like my seasonals, I have to sit down and go, okay, if you're in the middle of this group, how do we organize ourselves? How does this work? The Alchemical Congress is in charge of the academic alchemists, the ones who think of themselves as the real alchemists, because they have access to the books and they know the true history of the world. They know that Baum was an alchemist and that he was messing with Baker, and they know that Baker was fair game to be messed with because she had failed in her bid to take over the Alchemical Congress. And then you have the self-taught alchemists who nonetheless take it very seriously and don't want to have any of the frills or fripperies. And those are the ones that are billing herbal filters out of their gardens and are doing their workings on a very small level. In the Alchemical Journeys books, alchemy is basically what sorcery has become. We don't have much magic outside of the incarnates and the alchemists because it's all been boiled down and condensed. So there aren't witches necessarily. What you'll have are those self-taught alchemists. And that meant that there had to be a lowest rung. I know we're audio only, and I appreciate that because wow, am I not camera ready right now? But I hope y'all can hear the air quotes I put around some of these words.
I think your air quotes are very well articulated by your inflection.
Good. So you have the lowest rung alchemists, which are the ones all the other alchemists look down on, and those would be the hot topic alchemists. And that's kind of modeled off the way that the pagan societies worked when I was in college, where you had the real witches who belonged to the Order of the Golden Dawn or otherwise some kind of formalized group, like they were trying to recreate organized religion. And then underneath them, you had the people that took it very seriously and weren't flashy about it and therefore got taken a little more seriously. And then you had the hot topic witches, which is what I was, hot topic Wiccan.
Another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was Harry's grandparents' home of Castleview.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a castle that was like brought over from England. Are there any castles like that?
Yes, there are actually. There have been various manor houses and smaller castles. I don't think anyone's ever been like, I'm going to move Balmoral. But manor houses and smaller castles that people just decided, you know what, I have a lot of money. I would like this to be in the country where I live. And they go and they get it. And that is one thing you can do with a couple $1 million. I can think of way better things you could do, like giving it to me. That would be fantastic. If you have that much money, hey, I will just go to Disney World for 10 years. And at the end of it, I will have been at Disney World for a decade. Better than a castle. But yeah, that is a thing that has happened. It was also a plot point in a 1990s cartoon called Gargoyles, where they moved the castle.
It was.
They moved the castle from Scotland over to New York. And they got the idea from the same place I did, which was the lumber billionaires and the rich people of the Gilded Age who were paying to relocate these things.
When did you decide, at what point you wanted to bring in some of the characters from Middle Game, Roger and Dodger and Erin? Did you know that there was like a definitive point in Melanie and Harry's journey where they just had to meet?
Yes, in part because Melanie and Harry, they start from zero. They know nothing. They are thrown into a bad situation that has been partially orchestrated because you mentioned the Jacks and Jennies. If you are a potential winter or summer, your Jack or your Jenny is supposed to show up for you when you're a kid. They're supposed to be there from like the age of 12 onward, ideally. And they teach you all of these things as you're growing up. They help you get used to this idea. They are the nanny to your warlock dowling. You expect come your 13th birthday that this is going to happen. But Harry and Melanie didn't get to have that, though they were supposed to. And that meant they knew nothing. And as an author, that was very helpful for me because it meant I didn't have to explain much to the reader. But it was also a bit of a hindrance because it meant things were happening that I couldn't explain to the reader necessarily because there's nobody on the page that knows it. Roger and Dodger know a whole bunch of this stuff. They have had some time to sit down and research. There is a gap between Middle Game and Seasonal Fears. It's not a huge gap, but as of Seasonal Fears, it is later than the world has ever previously been allowed to be, and they are really enjoying that. Plus, a lot of people at the end of Middle Game were asking about the potatoes, so I knew the potatoes had to come up. And I knew where they had settled, which kind of gave me a timeline because Melanie and Harry start in Portland, and that means that when they hit the location that Roger and Dodger are in, they're not moving anymore. My brother says that the best description of Dodger, and I don't actually disagree with him like that on this, is what if a supervillain really mostly just wanted to be left alone? The main reason Dodger is not a huge force of destruction is that she just wants you to leave her alone to do math, play card games, and buy potatoes. Roger would like to benefit the world, but he hasn't quite figured out how yet.
If people buy this book, will we figure out how he'd like to benefit the world in the future? Possibly.
If people buy this book, we will eventually find out how he, so here is the thing, dun, dun, dun. If people buy these books and I am able to continue, the whole set of 5 does form a coherent alchemical journey. They're each mapped to an element. Middle Game is the book that is fire. Seasonal Fears is the book that is earth. The next book up, if I get to write it, is called Tidal Creatures, and that is obviously water. And then after that, we will have air and aether, which was considered an element at the time that alchemy was really a big deal. If I get through all 5 of them, you'll get to see a full resolution of this whole problem, what's been going on, and how do we handle being incarnate gods?
I'm really excited. I think people are going to really enjoy this book. I am looking forward to the 3rd book and everything else within the universe and also without. Are you working on anything else at the moment in a different genre or universe?
So right this second, and I do mean right this second, up until I had to start fighting with my tech to try to get into this interview, which we started about 8 minutes late today because my computer just did not want to let me be on Zoom. But right up until I started that battle, I was working on the next encrypted book, which will come out next year. It's called Backpacking Through Bedlam, and it's the direct follow-up to Spelunking Through Hell. And then after this is done, I will go straight into the novella that will go in the back of that book. I pretty much always have a tight rolling schedule that I have to adhere to. And hopefully within the next couple weeks, as we get sales figures in for Seasonal Fears, I'll find out whether I'm writing Tidal Creatures and be able to launch into that at the end of that novella.
Looking forward to all of it. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me.
So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Our guest was
Seanan Mcguire.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.